Resistance yenu iyanqomeka. Nisezinyathelweni zikaRholihlahla.
Five continents, 137 cities, a hub and platform for metropolises to connect, share experiences, and mobilize on a wide range of local and global issues. This is the 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting. A global network of 137 cities and metropolitan areas has converged here at the Sandton Convention Centre for the 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting. Now, it's the second time that South Africa's Johannesburg is hosting city leaders and mayors from around the world. Come with me and let's see what they have in store for us. Metropolis World Congresses and annual meetings are the main opportunities to promote the major cities of the world. Hosted by different Metropolis members every year, these events count on the presence of the key decision makers of the major cities and metropolitan areas of the world. South Africa's Sandton Convention Centre played host to the 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting.
Our cities are very vibrant, as is our cooperation for the benefit of our cities and their residents. For me, as the acting president of Metropolis, this is a very special annual meeting.
The governing mayor of Berlin in Germany is the acting president of Metropolis.
Ja, es ist vor allen Dingen natürlich wichtig, dass wir über die
It is of particular importance that we look at the big issues, the big problems that we are facing in our cities, that of population growth, that of education, healthcare and climate change.
Veränderung, das sind die großen Themen und darüber tauschen wir uns gemeinsam aus.
Now, I understand that the cities in itself are key drivers of the global economy. How will you be positioning the cities to even drive further the GDPs of the various economies?
Ja, dadurch, dass die Städte wachsen, dass die großen Unternehmen.
Well, we see the cities that are growing right now, that business is growing in the cities, that scientific activities are growing in the cities, and this is, of course, very important and puts the cities into a very important position for the economic development. And that is where the populations in the cities are so important. We need to provide a scientific basis. We need to support the companies. We need to create an environment in which students can learn in our cities.
Diese Infrastruktur in den Städten statt.
What role will African cities play in the network of cities?
Ja, die afrikanischen Städte spielen natürlich eine
African
große
cities are
Rolle,
very
sind
important
aber auch Städte,
for our network. They are facing rapid development, as many other cities are as well. They are facing population growth. There are social issues they have to address. How do we deal with the poor and the rich people in our cities? How do we deal with refugees that come to our cities from different cultural backgrounds, from different religious backgrounds? And there, of course, African cities with their expertise and experience play a very important role.
Die afrikanischen Städte gerade auch mit ihrer Erfahrung eine große Rolle.
Now, that's a very valid point you bring there about bridging the inequality gap, especially with cities and the slums that are around there. How are you going to tackle these issues of inequality?
It is very important that such social differences are addressed early on already. We need to start at a young age. We need to give young people perspective in life, and that is where education plays such a very important role. We need to start at the school level, but then also bridging the gap between school and work life. And that is where Germany and Europe has a lot of expertise. We've got much experience in this area, and that is what we would like to contribute to our discussions here, so that we can provide hope and perspective for the future generation.
Now, you mentioned earlier on that 50% of the world's populations already lives in cities, and then in the future we're expecting over 70% of the populations to move to cities. Now, where will the opportunities be created for these influx of people coming in?
Ja, es ist ja etwas, womit man arbeiten muss als
That is the area of work for politicians. It is an issue that we cannot simply think away. People will go there where they think that they can find a better life for themselves, and that is currently in the cities, because of the infrastructure that exists there, the healthcare system, education, work. And that is why the mayors of this world have to start organizing, have to start investing into roads, schools, hospitals, etc. Because if we don't address these problems, they will simply get bigger.
Krankenhäuser, das ist die Aufgabe dieser Jahre. Wir müssen sie bewältigen, denn die Probleme werden sonst in den Städten noch deutlicher, noch sichtbarer werden.
And then just lastly, how are we driving entrepreneurship in the different cities? Because that's where it could alleviate some of the problems that the cities are facing.
Economic development, yes, of course, we need to support the founders of young startups, of young companies. And that is why we need to focus on the smart city concept. That is the cities of the future. And we need to look into issues such as renewable energies. We need to focus on mobility solutions. And we need to look at the interface with science and startups, so that founders of young businesses can actually see a good path for themselves in our cities. And that is why every investment into universities is an investment into our future.
In die Universitäten eine Investition in die Zukunft.
Inclusivity was the key agenda of this year's Metropolis meeting, with over 200 speakers converging in South Africa's Gauteng province to share ideas and experiences. Gauteng is South Africa's smallest province, occupying just 1.5% of the land area. As small as it is, it contains 25% of the country's population, which is equal to 14 million people. Ismail Vadi is the man responsible for the province's roads and transport.
The most important thing is to bring all the major players of major metropolitan cities together. There are mayors, there are senior officials, municipal managers. And the sharing of ideas and the sharing of experiences, I think, are the most important things. Conference is really jam-packed with a very rich program. Today I think there are 12 parallel sessions. I would have loved to attend a number of them, but unfortunately I'm speaking in the transport and mobility section. So it's quite difficult to try and embrace everything. But we're hoping that with the sharing of ideas, there's a learning experience and finding solutions. I think major cities are experiencing problems throughout the world. Problems of in-migration, problems of migration and so-called refugees, inequalities, infrastructure that's under stress and pressure, lack of funding. So these are common problems, whether it's in the first world or developing world. They might have different manifestations, but I think at the root of it is how do we grow cities, how do we govern them effectively, how do we build infrastructure so that people live in livable cities.
Now, looking at the African continent, I'm sure some of the agenda will be inclusive growth. From your specific MEC role, what are you looking for the African city?
Look, I think on the African continent, employment is really in cities. Outside of that, unless you're having a rural existence, you're into farming or subsistence farming, the only real source of employment and earning income is in cities. And that's why we're having such a rapid movement of people into urban centers and large cities, and it's creating significant problems. I mean, we're getting almost, in our context, we've got informal settlements, massive growth of informal settlements. In others, there are slum-like settlements emerging. And you can't have young people, children growing up in that environment. It's not sustainable. So I think we have to begin to look at African cities as growth points, as potential points for inclusion and economic empowerment and income earning. But at the same time, we've got to design them in such a way that they become livable for our people. And that's the real challenge for the African continent.
For a clearer understanding on this meeting's objectives for the African continent, we caught up with the Secretary General of the United Cities and Local Governments of Africa.
We have 24 cities that are very important for the transformation of our continent. Among them, of course, the Gauteng province, Lagos in Nigeria, Cairo in Egypt. These are the backbone. And on this, you have 20 other cities that are connecting Africa and the rest of the world. It is very critical that these people share knowledge, share experience, because they share the same kind of problems. Rapid urbanization, changing targets in terms of infrastructure, building, housing, and so on, and youth that are let's say the bulk of the urban population in Africa compared to the other metropolis in the world, where aged population is more than youth population. So the characteristics of African metropolises are that they are young, They are growing very fast, they are not that well planned, and they lack infrastructure.
Now, talking about not that well planned, inequality stands out like a sore thorn on the side of many African cities, with the example being here in Sandton, Johannesburg, the richest square mile on the African continent, and just right across it is Alexandra, where it's one of the poorest places in the African continent. How are we going to address these challenges, and how is it going to be tackled over here?
This is exactly the theme of this meeting, how to build more inclusive cities. And the legacy of apartheid in South Africa made it possible to have this proximity between Sandton and Alexandra. But at the same time, you need to see how you can plan, given the differences between the two neighborhoods, and given the means that the public authorities can collect, but also given the will of the citizen to share and care about one another. So I think it is very critical that we discuss at length on the way forward, not just agonizing about the situation, but setting strategies that will, by 2030, as the international community asks us to do, that will get a way forward towards inclusive and sustainable cities in Africa.
The first day kicked off with many parallel discussions focusing on challenges our cities face, ranging from the economic inclusion in the fourth industrial revolution, leveraging rice-based approaches to social inclusion, to bridging the generation divide and advancing inclusion of people with disabilities. Gauteng's Ekurhuleni Mayor, Mzwandile Masina, shared some challenges of running an industrial city and how his team is tackling them.
In our own situation as the city of Ekurhuleni, our population is now sitting at about 3.5 million and is growing over the coming period. We can safely say that since 2011, our population has been growing, and we anticipate that over the next 5 years, our population will be around 4 million. Essentially, we are dealing with a macro challenge of uneven spatial development in terms of capital concentration. As long as there are provinces in the country that are starved of industrial capital, there will always be a process of migration or settlement, resettlement from those areas. Consequently, historic industrial cities such as Ekurhuleni and others will forever have to contend with challenges of rapid population growth, which puts demand of our human settlement strategies at par. At the level of micro trend, this growing number of people coming coming into cities in search for work and better life essentially means that we have to increase the spending of capital projects, especially concentrating on infrastructure, sanitation, the supply of water, and other provision of human settlement in our own spaces. Because of budget constraints, the per capita growth capital expenditure tend to be far below the growth demand as the consequence of the urban migration. This then tend to fit into the problem of growth of informal settlement and underdeveloped areas. As a short to medium term responses to these problems, as City of Ekurhuleni, we are now working to upgrade the profile of this informal settlement that house about 164,000 households. We do this by reblocking them in a manner that allows us to build access road, ensure that some of the informal settlements are electrified, and then bring the refuse collection infrastructure so that those areas can also be descent. We have also begun the process of handing over to the people all the municipal-owned land that was actually classified as illegally occupied by the people in the informal settlement in particular.
Residents of Ekurhuleni were afforded the opportunity to voice their concerns directly to the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your presentation, and I'm really excited with your new cities. But I'd really want to find out, where are these going to be located? Are we going to continue to place our people in the peripheries of the cities, or are we bringing them closer to job opportunities and where they can receive social infrastructure and amenities?
In your area, you have dolomite, you have undermined gold mines there. What is your municipality actually doing to assist residents who have been historically located and settled on those areas which according to us is not suitable, for human settlements? And then secondly, how will you prevent that thing happens again, that you actually settle people on top of dolomite where you have sinkholes falling in and water rushing in, and then actually destroying the houses?
Lastly, it's around the issue of access to alcohol. We have a number of alcohol outlets in our communities in terms of regulating and monitoring those outlets, because some of them are found closer to schools where the minors are having access to alcohol and even teachers themselves during office hours.
Ekurhuleni Mayor Mzwandile Masina replied to the people's concerns.
With regard to the question, what do we do with the areas where there are informal settlements, especially next to the mine dams and mine shafts and things like those? We have quite a number of those in our own communities, and we have been working on a systematic program to relocate some of the communities to the most suitable land. But what we find is that in many of these informal settlements, you have a mixture of people who will qualify for your ordinary housing program, but also you have majority of those who will not qualify for human settlement programs. So it begins to give us challenges. Then you meet a lot of resistance, especially from those who would have come to the country illegally and so on, them moving into those specific areas. And more often than not, you hear communities complaining that those areas where they have settled, whether dangerous or not, they are closer to where they work. So we begin to experience some of the challenges. What we have been doing as an experience in the city, we have been looking for available pieces of land nearby those communities so that we do not completely dislodge them from the areas. And our city is highly dolomitic. We've begun now a new process. MMC of city planning is here with us here. We've begun a process of exploring the use of technology, because we can no longer avoid some of the spaces to make sure where the area is dolomitic. Our engineers, they come and do their work. From there, we use technology to ensure that we are actually building. There are some few MEC, some of the buildings now where we can actually take you and the land was able to build a sustainable human settlement, and the structures there are being inspected from time to time. They are found to be solid. Yes, Sisboni, there will be no point for us to continue perpetuating the spatial planning setup of apartheid, where blacks must reside in the far-flanked areas and then you leave the other communities. We want to make sure that we create integrated, sustainable communities. That is why I was saying that we must promote the mixed-use typologies in our communities, but also we must say to the haves that we must be able to appreciate that not everyone is going to live in a house of R1 million. There will be those who live in a house for 100,000 rand, and it has nothing to do with your value, by the way, because that's the era that we are facing, that where we're supposed to be stimulating development in some of the areas, we are told about the value and everything, because if you look into the quality of the housing that we are now building, for me, it's very, very impressive. So I'm saying that we need to work towards that. And it's important, the point that you are raising, that you can't have people who are residing far from the areas where they are working. We must make sure that all our citizens are closer to the working areas, including the factories. And I think that the land available for human settlement, we must move away from just building houses. We must agree that we want to build human settlements in all communities, and we must make sure that our communities are integrated. The question around the legacy infrastructure is that the reality is almost all cities, the infrastructure is aging, is giving us a lot of problems. So the issue is, what are the programs in place to begin to respond to those, and what are the cities doing? For instance, in our city, we have already started a major program to revamp our infrastructure and ensure that it's connected, so that the idea of a single city is not just an idea, but it's a reality. in terms of our water, electricity, and other necessary infrastructure. But also, because of the development and in migration, we've got to make sure that we build excess capacity of infrastructure so that we are able to respond adequately to deal with issues of our communities. Yes, we do have a number of interventions to ensure that we support industries, especially that are ailing. You know that Ekurhuleni is a manufacturing hub of the continent. So we're doing everything possible to make sure that we promote industrialization, we revitalize manufacturing, but also we give full support to industries. The last question from Ms. Mkhize, why is it so difficult for us to enforce bylaws? The answer is simple. It's human behavior. People do wrong things knowingly, educated or not. You know that you must respect other citizens. Don't play your music loud, but when you have a party, you have no consideration for other residents and so on. It starts with small things that are manageable. You don't know the major frustration, especially for municipalities, is around waste collection. You know, you have the system is designed for a single house, a single family of, say, 5 on average. But in the backyards, you've got lots of structures there. You end up with about 5 or 10 families for that matter. So the waste collection system become problematic because we are unable to service all those houses at a particular point in time. So it means we've got to relook into our own mechanism on how we are dealing with such things. The funding of the bulk for the mega projects, you know that between national, province, and local, we're working together. But we have come to realize that the funding will not be sufficient for us to roll out these mega projects. Hence, we are talking to a number of developers to come on board, and because we're implementing mixed-use typologies in these projects, and we're beginning to see, in fact, there is few of those where we're beginning to see the contribution. As a city, ours is to make sure that there is bulk available. The province and national are helping us with top structure, but you need massive investment from private sector to be able to deal with these issues.
Gender inequality and inclusion was also a key theme of this year's meeting. Speakers came far and wide, including Valeria Molina, who's a gender activist in Colombia.
We work with all the ONGs in Medellin, and we did a very beautiful work from the community to the city. Working, we did graffitis with a lot of message about this. We did a conversation in the streets in the buses, with the people in the buses. We did a lot of things that make people think about this problem, that people think, what, sexual harassment, this is a problem for girls, but it is, because girls and women doesn't feel safe to go out in the streets when it's dark. We all the time are afraid, and I'm all the time, I ask all the men, do you feel afraid to go out in the streets to be sexual harassed in the nighttime? Men never feels that, women we feel it. And we are all the time working about this and look into the eyes to the men. We work with men, we work with the problem, because men is the ones who do it to us. And we are doing that. It's very beautiful because we think that we need to talk about this thing all the time, in the streets, with the people, in the schools, and that's what we did in Medellin.
Now, I'm not sure how long you've been in South Africa for, but what have you taken out of Africa when it comes to gender equality and just women progression in general?
In Africa, yesterday I arrived. I haven't heard a lot of it, what happened here. I think that the cultural problem about women is something that happens in all around the world. It's not something that happened in Medellin, in Africa. It's something that happens all around. And I think that we have to work together, men and women, to be equal.
The city of Tijuana in Mexico shared some of its innovations in working towards inclusivity.
On behalf of the mayor, Juan Manuel Gastelum, very honored to be here. First of all, very grateful with Metropolis, this great association, because we just joined a year ago, and we're learning. We're here not just to tell the world what Tijuana is doing, but to know the public policies that the world is sharing in this great association. Like Daniel said, Tijuana is a great, a lot of migration is coming to our city. So as the main subject of Metropolis, this annual session, inclusiveness and equity is the main subjects to our city right now. A lot of migration, not just of Mexican citizens, but of all the world, South American, Asian, because of the border with the United States. We are at 5 minutes from the border with San Diego, so that's what we're doing here.
And then how are you taking all this influx of immigrants coming into Mexico and the Mexican cities? How are you taking that and changing them into opportunities to grow the economy?
Well, at Tijuana we had a great, a fast-paced growing on industrial and manufacturing. So we have places to work for most of all the people that comes to Tijuana. Most of the people that comes to our city, they do it because they wanted to cross the border. But when they see the benefits of being in our city, they just wanted to stay. We are a warm city that offers job, economy, food, industrial, etc.
And what are you hoping to take out of this meeting of Metropolis?
Well, we liked Metropolis has this big platform of public policies around the world. We're learning not at the platform, but being here, taking note, learning from all the leaders, politics leaders from all the world.
Creating employment for the influx of people moving into cities was also one of the focal areas of the 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting. Experts have it here that by 2030, 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. Stay tuned for more of the Metropolis Annual Meeting after the break. Welcome back to this 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting special. Now it's a hive of activity around Johannesburg and Gauteng as delegates from over 137 countries meet here for the Metropolis Annual Meeting. Dignitaries and delegates alike were afforded the opportunity to explore the Gauteng province. One of the highlights was a trip to Iputeng Primary School in Alexandra. Iputeng Primary School, at the heart of poverty-riddled Alexandra, a township that's a stone throw away from Africa's richest square mile, Sandton. Now, Alexandra is a township that hosted and many great icons lived in, icons such as Nelson Mandela when he first came to Johannesburg. Alexandra is one of the iconic townships of South Africa, which housed many of the country's leaders and humanitarians, including Nelson Mandela when he first came to Johannesburg. The Premier of Gauteng, David Makura, also made Alexandra home once upon a time.
Malibongwe, anginizwa malibongwe, igama lamakhosikazi, wathinta abafazi, wathinta imbokodo, hola Alex, hola. Hola, Alex, hola. Sanbonan.
Premier Makura details some of Alexandra's history.
Well, Alexandra is a very special place. It's one of the oldest townships in South Africa. But when also one of the few places where black people used to own title to their property, freehold property. When Alexandra was started here, black people were allowed to buy a piece of land and to have title. And they lived side by side with whites. And when apartheid took full steam, the segregation happened. And the title that the people who bought properties here had, that title was taken away from them. Because as we came to know it, black people were not allowed to own any piece of land. Alexandra occupies a very special place in the history of our struggle. Many leaders came from Alexandra. In the very early phases of our resistance in our country. We had great leaders here like R.G. Baloyi, who was a one-time Treasurer General of the ANC, who owned a bus company, which was later taken away from him by the City Council. We also had other leaders, and Nelson Mandela arrived and stayed here in Alexandra. Alfred Nzo, Joan Tlantla. We have our Treasurer General of the governing party, Paul Mashatile, comes from Alexandra. The Deputy Minister, Obet Papela, comes from Alexandra. So, but the most important thing for me is we brought a delegation from the Metropolis conference to Alexandra to outline the challenge that we still face. That the apartheid special planning is going to take much longer for us to reconfigure. Black people stay very close to the richest square mile in Africa. That's Sandton. They live in Alexandra. So we were discussing at the Metropolis building cities in a way that is inclusive, in a way that brings people together, in a way that ensures that there's no place for the rich and a place for the poor. And we are working very hard. And as long as you have a place like Alexandra still lagging behind, we say aluta continua, the struggle continues.
On this day, the focus was on education and ensuring that the children of Alexandra are provided an opportunity to fight poverty through education. Iputeng Primary School received generous donations here, including a new jungle gym and new classrooms that are currently under construction.
Let me just take the opportunity to acknowledge that the Hust family, Ms. Tasia was here representing them. They have donated 1 million to the school. And of course, this is for the work that they are doing to improve the school, the classrooms. Let's give them a round of applause as well for the 1 million contribution. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, at this point, allow me to invite the learners of the school who are going to render the poem for us.
South Africa, my land! South Africa, my beautiful country! We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustice of our past. We honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, like Nelson Mandela. And we honor those who suffered and sacrificed their lives to make sure that the next generation can live in a free country. We respect those who have worked to build and develop our country and believe that South Africa belongs to all blacks, whites, Indians, and colors.
While the learners serenaded the audience here with the poem, we caught up with the Hurst family who generously donated R1 million to Iputeng Primary.
I'm Trish Bayers and my brother is Carl Hurst, and it was his privilege to donate R1 million for building 4 classrooms, which is the beginning of a project where we hope that we're going to get lots of funds so we can have the full complement of 12 classrooms for the children of Ipputing Primary School so that they can enjoy their education, be more comfortable and have more facilities.
I understand the Hurst family has got a bit of history circulated around Ipputing Primary School. Can you tell us, just detail a bit about it?
Well, my children and my grandchildren are connected to a church called Melrose Community Church, which come here and do endless things. They paint, they teach the children English, they help the children with their studies. So it's our family as a whole, really, who enjoy being part of Ipputing Primary School.
Bongani Rainmaker Logistics also dig deep into their pockets to assist Ipputing Primary School and other schools around the Gauteng province.
We currently the service provider for the Department of Education in Gauteng, and looking after the LTSM contract for the department. We were approached by the Premier's office, to assist in terms of helping and also see what we can do in terms of it. The fact that we are passionate about education, we're involved with it for the last 18 years. We specialize in school distribution, specialize in schools with rural requirements and that in it, and therefore, we felt it was very important to actually contribute as well.
And then we are at Ipputing, I beg your pardon, primary school, right at the heart of Alexandra Township. Are you involved with this particular school, and what will you be doing here today?
We actually have set up a jungle gym for the school. So they had one that was quite in a bad state in it, and we've actually redone a complete new one for them.
And I understand this part of the Metropolis is where they celebrate the centenary of our struggle icon Nelson Mandela. Do you want to share maybe a few sentiments around his legacy and what it means for places like Alexandra and the people of South Africa?
I think for people not getting involved into schools, they do not understand what it's all about in it. And, it's very important to get involved to understand the legacy that he has left behind and to build on that and to make it grow, because otherwise we're not going to change it.
The Gauteng Premier, the Metropolis Acting President, and other dignitaries here were given the opportunity to plant trees for Ipputing Primary. We spoke to some of the dignitaries here, including the mayor of Uruguay's capital city, in the midst of them getting their hands dirty.
And I'm very happy to participate of this meeting, also to the possibility to grow vegetables for the future of the humanity and for our child. No?
And what are you taking out of this as the capital city of Uruguay? What are you taking? What are some of the tips that you're taking out of this?
For us, Montevideo is a beautiful city. Montevideo is a country with Uruguay is a country with good development, and perhaps the most important, the last 50 years, we have a very good, better distribution of the richest. No? Okay, for us, it's very important because it's important that a country grow. But it's most important than the redistribution of the richest, yes? And for us, all this contact with all the city, to know the experience, to know the technology and the best ways to work to the people is very important for us.
Wow, the redistribution of the country's wealth, something that South Africa can take a leaf out of Uruguay. But what other lessons can the African continent and African cities take from your city?
Perhaps the most important is to work together with only nation to found the best in this difficult world. I don't like the system. I prefer a system with more solidarity and more evenly. For this reason, to work together for a different world, I think that South African people are searching your way. It's important that each country search the best way to a best society.
The Secretary General of Metropolis was also one of the dignitaries here who gave insight on some of the discussions that have been happening at this year's meeting.
We were looking forward to this meeting in Gauteng, hosted by Gauteng in Johannesburg, and we had great discussion. In fact, this morning we had our board of directors and we had a policy debate during 2 hours, and our mayors and vice mayors and councillors around the table, they were discussing about the challenges of inclusion, diversity, and the bigger a city is, the more challenges the city is facing in terms of sustainability, waste management, inclusion, especially as well, and citizen participation. And this morning we're discussing about these kind of issues. How our societies, and we have to accept, even you like it or not, that our societies, and especially metropolitan areas, they are diverse. And we need to find solutions for that. We need to make cities, someone said, it's not only about living together, it's about acting together. And that's this idea of behind Metropolis. How we all together bring in all these major cities and metropolitan areas around the world, how we work together in order to find solutions in our cities to improve the quality of life of our citizens.
I was about to mention that we're in Alexandra Township at this very moment, which is a stone throw away from Africa's richest city, Sandton. Have you made plans to include the people of that live in squalor in places such as Alexandra, which are close by to cities?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the reality. When we talk about metropolitan cities and metropolises, we are thinking not only in terms of the boundaries, the administrative boundaries of the cities, as well about the impact that these cities have around them and the surrounding territories. And that's as well what we ask our mayors say. Well, when you develop a plan, a policy, you take into account the impact that you have. And that's a reality we see around the world. It's not only in Africa and South Africa, but you see in Asia, even now in Europe, in America, is that in these metropolitan areas is where you see as well all disparities and inequalities. And we have to fight against that.
Now, the stats have come out that by 2030, almost 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. Are you planning for this influx into cities?
Yeah, and it's not only 50% of the population will be living in urban areas, but 50% of the 50% will be living in metropolitan areas. So when you have this reality, like here, Gauteng represents, it's a city region, it's a province, but it's a metropolitan area of different metropolitan areas, and it has only one third of the GDP of South Africa, but you have the reality like in Latin America, you have Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. It's over 30% of the population there in Argentina lives in the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires. And if you go to Europe, it's the same. In Spain, Barcelona, Madrid, I think over 22% of the GDP of Spain. That's a reality. Major cities are growing, they are growing more, and they have an impact in their lives, not only in their own territory, but nationally and internationally. So that's as well when we gather here, we are not only looking at our own solutions, but also which is the impact of what we're doing and how we together can look at solutions that have a better impact, not only in our own city, but beyond the city.
Now,
of course, and you're right, the reality is that you say that it's having Sandton and here Alexandra, these realities are not sustainable in the long term. You cannot have metropolitan areas or metro regions, city regions, where you have these kind of disparities. And I think our mayors and members of Metropolis, they are really aware about that, and they are struggling to find solutions for that.
Now, we're in South Africa, of course. Metropolis 2018 is right here in Gauteng. And we can't speak of South Africa without mentioning the great struggle icon, Nelson Mandela. Yeah. What have you taken from his lessons, and what are some of the things that you'll be even taking back to your country?
I take 3 things with me. I could take more because it was only 3 days, but lots of learnings, a lot of food for thought. So I think one is you never give up. You never should be giving up. Even if you think that there are no solutions, there's a way forward. So it's about resilience, and I think Nelson Mandela he was and is still a great example of resilience, of never giving up. That's one. I think he said, and that's why we're here today in this school in Alexandra, is about learning, education. Education is the key for developing, is the key for opportunities for everybody.
A person who holds this school close to heart is Barcelona's city manager, who once visited Iputeng Primary School in Alexandra 2 decades ago.
The impression I get is that, it hasn't changed enough, I would say. But there's one very significant change, that apart from struggle, now you have hope. And you can see children here who have it very clear in mind that they've got rights and that they will seek those rights and they will change their own environment, Alexandra and the whole of the country of South Africa. So it's very special for me. It's very moving to be here.
Very inspiring message. While not much has changed, they have hope, at least. But let's get on to the Metropolis Annual Meeting. What are some of the key agendas that are coming out of it?
Well, we're talking about big cities, and we're sharing experiences, basically on how to make cities better. how improving people's lot in big cities. That means improving the traffic, that means the environment and sustainability, and avoiding wasting too much. And that also includes especially fighting against inequalities, against social imbalance. And well, of course, you've been doing lots of work in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in the greater metropolitan area here. We also have back home. So there's ways we can talk about that. One of the things which is first and foremost in the agenda of any big city is education. And that's why we're here in this school, primary school in Alexandra right now, trying to help each other on how education can change the life of people in a big city.
And you mentioned a very crucial point there, which is inequality. And you've been to Alexandra 20 years ago. I'm sure you've been to Sandton as well. And you've seen the amount of change that's happening in Sandton. While people in Alexandra are still living basically in squalor, has a Metropolis Annual Meeting spoke about tackling such issues and including and bridging the inequality gap between the two places?
Yes, of course. Any of our big cities, if it wasn't 20 years ago, if it's not now, it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, we had shanty towns. We've all had similar problems. Now, how we overcome these problems is the issue. It's not avoiding having problems. Cities, like people, have problems. The key there is how you overcome those problems. And it's not so much a question of where you get the money, because cities are wealthy, they're attractive, they're powerful, they can attract investment. It's how you invest with making people's lives better without expelling people from cities. In some European and Western cities, the problem now is that we're expelling people because cities are too expensive for them. We get the money in, but those people who don't have the money have to leave. So that's also a new development which is taking place in many big cities. And that's another kind of social inequality. We also have to fight against that. We've got to make people's lives better, but we also have to prevent people from leaving cities which have become too expensive for them. Both things are dangers, and both things are risks that we face in our cities. So we have to fight against poverty. We also have to fight against the excesses of prosperity. In some cities we also get that kind of development.
And I understand the Metropolis is about the whole world, 5 continents to be specific. But has there been a discussion on how to champion the agenda of African cities and their growth?
Yes, we have in Metropolis, in this network, we have over 100 big cities. We're talking about Metropolis, that's big conurbations in the world. And many of them are in Africa, and obviously Africa has been in the agenda. There, South Africa has a leading role. The fact that the meeting of Metropolis was held here in Gauteng is something very remarkable. And other African cities that have come, people from Dakar, people from Abidjan, from other African cities, they look to you, they look to South Africa to see how some of the advances, some of the progress that has been done in the Johannesburg area can be done in their own cities. Of course, they see you as leaders, and we are glad to contribute to your leadership also, because I think Africa needs that kind of leadership.
Women in Cities was also part of the delegation to Alexandra. Its executive director, Catherine Travis, details some of the work it does.
So we look at the place of women and girls in urban development and governance, particularly from a gender equality perspective, but also looking in terms of safe cities, so public spaces, markets, public transportation, to make sure that they're safe and inclusive for all women and girls.
And I understand that you've done a bit of research on the Metropolis cities. What have you found in those research?
So really interesting. So we took a look at the different cities that are members of Metropolis, and we found that 36% of them have policies that exist. So in 49 Metropolis members have policies looking specifically at the issue of women's safety in urban public spaces. So of those, there were 18 that actually had multiple policies. So we found 83 policies in total that should really serve as inspiration for the other metropolises that don't yet have policies to address this issue.
And then now you're in South Africa. I'm not even sure if it's your first time or you've been here before. But how do you find gender inequality and the issue of gender-based violence, for example, faced and dealt with here in South Africa?
So I'm lucky enough to be here. I'm also lucky to have a couple of my board members who are based here, and so really their expertise is the one we defer to about the local experience. I personally have had a good experience so far. I felt like there was a lot of receptivity to discussing the issues and acknowledgement of the different ways that men and women experience space, which, as we know, is a really important first step to then addressing the issues more concretely.
And what needs to be done in order to get all the rest of the other metropolis cities aware of gender-based violence, for example, and to actually include gender policies?
Sure. Well, you need more women and girls around the table, right? First of all, you need to understand that their experiences are somewhat different, and if you don't give them the space and the voice to be able to participate and speak out about their daily issues, then you're never going to be able to reflect their experiences in the urban environment. So they need a seat at the table, for sure. There need to be more women and girls who are planners, who are decision makers, who are involved in governments, who are metropolis leaders as well. And I think that will help to make a change, but I think we're getting there.
And then just on your discovery and your researches, when it comes to the African continent, what have you discovered there?
What we discovered was, in general, and I don't want to misspeak because I don't remember all the specific details, but in general there were a lot of policies that looked at things like public spaces and public transportation. So looking to see how those can be made more inclusive. So having stickers sometimes, or involving women and girls in designing public spaces were other initiatives that we observed that were happening here.
Today I went to the Constitution Hill, and I think that one thing that you have in here that we have to recover to Colombia is to remember all the time the history, and it makes this country to be all the time focused on the things that they have to change. And like all the things that you are doing now or today about talking about Mandela, doing ceremonies about Mandela, all the things that they teach to us, to all the world, make us be very proud of South Africa, and just think that you are a very, very beautiful society to try it all the time, to remember the past, to build the future.
The principal of Iputeng Primary School was overwhelmed with joy from the visit from world leaders and the generous donations.
We are actually hosting as a school 138 mayors of the world, from different parts of the world. And this day is significant to me in a sense that our kids are going to benefit because they have a new garden, and they have a new playground, and they have received books and some balls. And I think also it gave the entire school community an opportunity to learn something that they never knew before. That there is an association called Metropolis, which is led by the new president, President Mtila from Berlin. So it's actually a learning curve for most of us here. Thank you.
And then just principal, the number of dignitaries that have been here. We've seen the premier, and as you mentioned, a number of important mayors from around the world. What does this mean to the children that come here? What does it say to your students?
The number of our children, I think, they are actually challenged. They're challenged by the fact that they are not longer going to think about few careers. It has opened a door for children to start thinking about other careers. They didn't know that being a mayor is a career. It's something that one can follow as a profession, to be a leader of a city, leader of a province. So I think it has opened their eyes that the world is too big.
The 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting closed off with a panel discussion from some of the world's city leaders.
We'll now call upon Anna Merlin, who is a councillor in Metropolitan City of Turin in Italy. Anna, the stage is yours.
very much. Thank you very much. I will read my speech in English. That it is not my language, so forgive me if it's not absolutely correct. Since the Second World, the post-war period, a wide range of local actors have started to play a role in international scene. Consequently, diplomacy and international affairs, initially prerogative in the states, have become an integral part of the activity, not only for local authorities, but also for academia, private sector, consortia, ONG, and voluntary associations. States tend to take a center stage, but most of the achievements affecting us happen in urban and suburban areas. Suffice to mention economy, development, political reform, social innovation, environmental problems, migration. On the other hand, the onset of the internet and the spreading out of social media have given a significant boost to the global dimension. Local and international strategies are therefore integrated since no one can act alone.
Well, there you have it, a global network of 137 cities and metropolitan areas pledging to bridge the inequality gap while furthering the education within our cities and around them. I am Aviwe Mtila, and this is the 2018 Metropolis Annual Meeting.